Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Gaming Report, your news source for everything going on in the world of cloud gaming. I'm your host, Zach, and in this episode we have quite a bit to discuss. So we have some exciting news about the Shadow Ghost. We have a date for its release. That's a very exciting topic. Beyond that, we have an interview with Steve Perlman, the former CEO of OnLive, kind of detailing some of the triumphs and kind of talking about the story of OnLive and kind of what kind of led to its downfall that they weren't able to really talk about during a time where it was going through all the troubles that it had. Beyond that, we also have some discussion points about Xbox Live coming to more than just the Xbox and the Windows platform, so there's some exciting news there. And beyond that, we just have a little bit of quick topics for GeForce Now and PlayStation Now. So guys, without further delay, let's go ahead and get right to it. So our first news topic is quite exciting, and that is the release of the Shadow Ghost. Of course, you can pretty much use any piece of hardware laying around, whether it be an old gaming desktop, a laptop, or even your Android phone. But it is still cool to see an official piece of hardware come from Shadow, because theoretically this should be the best experience you're going to be able to get on the Shadow platform. Theoretically, things like USB over network should function the best on the Shadow Ghost, simply because they have that exact piece of hardware and they've been able to test it and work out any bugs in the system. And having fully functioning USB over network is going to be something that is very cool. So with that being said, we have the release on February 27th. I know a lot of Shadow users have been waiting for this since the reveal trailer, so it looks like the end is finally coming and we'll be able to get our hands on these units in the very short future. Beyond that, we did have the user guide for the Shadow Ghost. This was found on the FCC website. Someone on the US Discord for Shadow shared that. So thanks to whoever found that. I didn't write down the user's name, but they did find the FCC user guide. There's not a lot of new information here. We do know the exact hardware specs, I guess, in terms of the connectivity of what you'd be able to plug into the device. So we know that it has an audio jack, a single HDMI port, two USB 2, two USB 3, and an Ethernet port. I'm pretty sure we already knew all this, but we do have essentially the final specs of what they submitted to the FCC, so these shouldn't change at all. Otherwise, they'll have to resubmit their hardware to the FCC. So with that being said, I'm definitely excited to get my hands on the Shadow Ghost, to fully test it and put it through its paces to see if it functions really any better than just using an off-the-shelf Windows laptop that I've been using for testing. So with that being said, that's pretty much wraps up this news topic. There wasn't a lot to talk about here beyond the date, which is pretty exciting nonetheless, just because we're finally going to be able to get our hands on the Ghost. Our next news topic isn't something that I really ever expected to cover in depth, simply because at the time of founding this podcast in 2018, OnLive had long since been dead, and it actually had sold a couple times and changed hands a couple times, ending up in the hands of Sony. But with that being said, GameCrate was actually recently able to speak with the former OnLive CEO, Steve Perlman. I thought this was a pretty interesting article, and if you like the bullet points that I'm going to talk about here in this next segment, do head over to GameCrate to read that full interview. I did find it quite interesting to peer into the history of cloud gaming and kind of the pioneers of cloud gaming when it was just really starting out. So with that being said, before their demise, we do know that OnLive was working with Apple to bring OnLive to the Apple TV. This could have been a major benefit for OnLive and really made the Apple TV a gaming platform. But we do know that Apple ended up canceling the project before it was able to release. Before the project was canceled, though, they were able to get their OnLive controller working with the Apple TV. So we don't really know why the project was canceled. It sounds like Apple had the power to cancel the project, so it could have been that they were funding it possibly and didn't like the performance that they were able to get. I never was actually able to really try out OnLive. It was kind of before my days of cloud gaming, but it is interesting to kind of peer back into history and kind of look at the roots of what I am so involved in now. But we know the project was canceled and ultimately it never made it to the Apple platform. Beyond that, we know another bump along the road, and Steve talks about this, is the fact that Microsoft ended up changing their terms in their licensing, which made it against the terms of service to use Windows 7 for OnLive. They actually had to scramble. They only had 2 months to change from Windows 7 to Windows Server, and they were actually able to do it without really users noticing. He actually tells a funny story in there about how someone from Microsoft actually called saying, hey, we noticed you're still using Windows 7 instead of Windows Server. And he ended up saying that, hey, go open Notepad and you can go to About Notepad and it tells you which version of Windows you're using. And essentially, Microsoft backed off after that point in time. So you kind of see some points of like struggles or things that OnLive had to deal with in the history. And this is the thing that I thought kind of paralleled what Shadow has now. So Shadow right now is like the only platform with Windows 10. And that's quite powerful because it gives you access to the Microsoft Store. And when I was reading this, I was like, what if Microsoft decides to force Shadow to get rid of Windows 10? We already saw this with Shadow, where over in Europe, they were running GTX 1080s. And over here in the US, they had to run the P5000s. Essentially, they're equivalent in terms of performance, but they're much more expensive. And that's simply due to the licensing. Now, the thing that I hope for Liquid Sky is the fact that back when OnLive had this issue versus now we have a new CEO of Microsoft, and Microsoft has really changed their vision. They see that Windows really isn't the future of Microsoft. Now, Windows is probably going to continue for quite some time, but they see that subscriptions like the Office 365 platform and their cloud computing with Microsoft Azure is the future. In fact, they've even started offering like Linux platforms on Azure. They see that it's more these subscription things where cloud computing and Office 365 are the future of Microsoft, and they kind of have changed their vision. And we even see that with Xbox, with the Project X Cloud that's coming out here in the future. So with that being said, I hope this won't be an issue for Shadow like it was for OnLive, because having the Microsoft Store is quite nice because it gives you access to the Game Pass, and that's one thing that Microsoft has been talking about here in late 2018 and even in 2019 about Microsoft being more involved with the PC market. And we actually have a little bit of discussion about that later, where they're not just being involved with the PC market, but much more with Android, iOS, and the Nintendo Switch. So I just thought that was very interesting and kind of paralleled what we have now with Shadow and Windows 10. The final bit that I wanted to talk about OnLive is really the story behind OnLive and all the puzzle pieces that came into play that led to the fall of the platform. So we've come to find out that HP had extended a $15 million loan to OnLive to continue funding development and the running of the platform, which also gave HP exclusive rights to negotiate a deal. So for this deal, OnLive was able to continue running and funding the development of the platform, furthering the technology, but HP was the only one able to come to the table to negotiate a deal, which likely meant that OnLive had to suddenly cut off any talks they had with other companies that might have been looking to purchase OnLive. So HP ended up suddenly pulling out this deal, which kind of left OnLive in a precarious situation. So of course now they suddenly have a $50 million loan that they have to pay back. They might have been banking on the fact that HP would buy them and they would no longer have to pay back this loan. Of course, you should never get a loan that you don't expect to have to pay back, but maybe that was the case. We also know that this suddenly left OnLive with no backup to sell OnLive to, simply because they had to cut off any communications with other companies that were trying to negotiate a deal because HP had those exclusive rights. And even if they did kind of have some foundations of companies looking to purchase OnLive, if they had to suddenly cut off communications with those people, then that likely left a sour taste in the mouth because no one truly likes being the second option. They always want to be your first option. So it's likely that some of the relationships between OnLive and other companies might have been soured due to this exclusive deal. We also know that due to the NDAs, they likely weren't able to truly talk about, to even companies that were trying to buy them, what led to HP cutting off the deal, or it's possible that OnLive themselves actually didn't really know at the time what HP was thinking and why they suddenly left the table. So the story continues with OL2, a company buying the assets for OnLive, and they actually were able to hire about half the OnLive staff at that point in time, but the other half were suddenly laid off with no severance packages and weren't really left with nothing, and they suddenly no longer had a job. We do know that Steve Perlman actually used $50,000 of his own money to help with insurance in the meantime for some of these employees, but we do know that it wasn't a graceful end for OnLive. They were hoping to get acquired, and hopefully the entire workforce would continue working on the OnLive platform, or at the very least get a decent severance package out of the end of their employment. We do know eventually after some time, OL2 ended up selling the platform to Sony, and that's kind of history as we know it. So it was just like interesting to look at another viewpoint into the fall of OnLive, straight from the people that are running the company at the time. I just thought that was interesting personally. Hopefully you guys thought that was kind of interesting to see a viewpoint into the fall of what was really the first cloud gaming platform, or at least the one that I knew about back in the day, but I never ended up actually trying it out. So let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, guys, which is about the Sony PlayStation Now platform. Moving on to our next topic, we're actually going from OnLive to a company that actually acquired quite a few of their assets with Sony and the PlayStation Now platform. So somewhat ironically, this is another cloud gaming platform that I haven't really covered a lot in this podcast, but as I entered in 2019, one of my goals for Thought Provoking Tech and the Cloud Gaming Report podcast was to kind of expand my coverage. I had been focusing quite primarily on like the tried and true that I have tested and have performed well, such as Shadow, GeForce Now, and Paperspace combined with Parsec. With that being said, in 2019, I wanted to kind of expand my coverage and look at the cloud gaming market as a whole and try to incorporate more platforms to test in my videos in the future. So with that being said, with PlayStation Now, what I'm going to be covering is going to be included more into the podcast, but for this topic, we have new games available on the platform for the month of February. So if you don't know much about the PlayStation Now platform, it's essentially a cloud gaming platform combined with a game subscription pass. So from what I can tell from the research I've done, it's mostly older games. So in comparison to Microsoft's Game Pass, those have first-party games available on day one. This appears to be primarily older games, but it still has a vast library of a lot of PlayStation classics and originals. So with that being said, we have quite a few games added to PlayStation Now for the month of February before I digress any further. So for the PlayStation 3 games, we have Battlefield Hardline, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, and Need for Speed Rivals. So a good collection of older games that were on the PlayStation 3. I definitely envision as we continue to go forward with the PlayStation Now coverage, we'll probably see a lot more PlayStation 4 games simply because it itself is actually entering into the end of life as we enter into the PlayStation 5 that is expected to launch possibly at the end of this year. So PlayStation 4 games available on the platform are Earth Defense Force 4.1, F1 2017, Magicka 2, Metro Last Light Redux, Mortal Kombat X, Pillars of Eternity, and Rebel Galaxy. So quite a few games have been added to the platform in the last month. And as I mentioned earlier, this is both a cloud gaming platform and a game subscription. So you can actually play this on the PlayStation as well as the you can actually play this on the PlayStation 4 as well as the PC. So that's primarily where I'll be doing my testing on the PC side of things. And maybe against the norm, I might be using Xbox controller. Simply, that's primarily why I play on Xbox when I do play on a console, is because I like the bigger controller. Or I might try to find a PlayStation style controller that's a little bit bigger maybe. But anyways, I definitely will be covering PlayStation Now in the future more. But let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, guys. Our next topic actually doesn't tie directly into cloud gaming, but it does heavily correlate with the xCloud initiative and the project that Microsoft is really working with there. And the goal behind that, which is to bring the Xbox platform to more devices and to more gamers. So with that being said, Microsoft is bringing the Xbox Live platform to Android, iOS, and Switch. This actually comes from a posting for GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference, and is about a talk that Microsoft is going to be hosting at GDC. So I think this is quite interesting. I definitely think that it ties into their initiative of what Project xCloud is going to attempt to do. And this might be kind of like the short-term future of bringing Xbox to more devices here in the future. So with that being said, I have a quick quote directly from their entry about their talk, which is, begin quote, "Now Xbox Live is about to get much bigger. Xbox Live is expanding from 400 million gaming devices and reach to over 68 million active players to over 2 billion devices with the release of their new cross-platform XDK. Get a first look at the SDK to enable game developers to connect players between iOS, Android, and Switch, in addition to Xbox and any game in the Microsoft Store on Windows PCs." End quote. So I think that definitely ties into what they've said before with Project xCloud. They have mentioned the 2 billion device mark before, and they definitely want to tap into anybody that wants to play a game can play that game on the Xbox platform. So like I've said before, I think this is going to be like their short-term implement, or how they short-term get people onto the Xbox platform by releasing this, development tool that allows developers to better facilitate cross-platform play using the Xbox Live platform regardless of whether you're playing on iOS, Android, Switch, Windows PC, or Xbox. Of course, this does bring challenges to developers on how to make cross-platform play fair, especially for certain types of games. Certain games like turn-based games, you could be just as competitive on a Android phone or iOS phone as you could on a PC where you have a mouse and keyboard. But certain games definitely lend advantages to certain platforms where you have dedicated input, whereas a phone you might just be using the touchscreen. But with that being said, it's definitely interesting nonetheless. And as I kind of hinted at, I think that this software development kit for developers is kind of going to be Microsoft's short-term tool that they're going to use to bring Xbox to more devices and more gamers. And their long-term tool, I definitely think, is going to be Project xCloud, where regardless of what device you have, you just use this software that allows you to play on a cloud version of the Xbox, regardless of what software or hardware you're actually running, with the exception of maybe like the PlayStation, because that is definitely evident that it's not here. That could have just been something you would assume anyways, because Sony and Microsoft are definitely heavy competitors in the console market, and I don't see Sony lending Microsoft any help into expanding the coverage of the Xbox platform. So that pretty much covers up that topic. I definitely will be looking forward to this talk. Hopefully they'll live stream it, and we'll be able to learn more about their initiative and what all of that actually entails. But I definitely think it will help collaborate or help with the cross-platform play in the future. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move to our final topic for this episode of the Cloud Gaming Report. Our final topic is the new games available on the GeForce Now platform, and without any delay, those are Tom Clancy's The Division 2 Private Beta, Kenshi, Myst 5 End of Aegis, Omnimusha Warlords. I probably completely butchered that. I do apologize, guys. Tales of Berseria, Warhammer 40,000 Mechanists, Frostrunner, and last but not least, Warriors Orkai 4. So there you have it, guys. Those are new games available that are compatible with the Xbox or with the GeForce Now platform. I don't know why I have Xbox on my mind right now, but anyways, thanks for watching or listening, guys. I do greatly appreciate your support. So whether you're watching this on your favorite podcast app, like it, or whatever feature they have where you show your support there, or if you're watching this on YouTube, do like that. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, both on your favorite podcast app as well as on YouTube. Once again, guys, thanks for your support. And until next time, Zach out.